So, Kristin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I work as a psychotherapist, work with helping people with anxiety and depression and overcoming compulsive behaviors. I'm also a mother of 2 teenagers and a wife. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, have you ever struggled with your weight?
I really haven't. I've struggled with just trying to eat healthier, eat cleaner, just to be healthier. But I really haven't struggled with my weight.
You've just stayed the same weight pretty much.
Pretty much, other than when I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you look great. Well, do you have talk to us about do you get on the scale or not get on the scale? And do you have a window of weight that you say I like to stay within X number of pounds?
I do. I like to stay within a certain amount of a certain weight, and I have a certain weight that if I get on the scale and it reaches that weight, then I will know to clean up my diet a little bit and exercise a little more, be a little bit more careful. I tend to get on the scale almost every day. I'm not obsessed with it. My husband, for one reason or another, moved the scale from the bedroom to the laundry room at one point, and just having it out of the bedroom for a few days, I stopped weighing myself, and when I got back on the scale, noticed I had gained some weight. So I'm not obsessed with it, but I do like to try to weigh myself every day because I just like to keep my body in what I think is a healthy number.
Okay. And so just make up a number that you would say, would you say it's a 5-pound window, 3-pound window, 7-pound window? What is that window that you say, I like to stay between this range and this range? What number is that?
It's usually about a 5-pound window. I don't beat myself up when I go over it at all. I go over it often. It just means that I need to be a little bit more careful.
So what kind of things would you say, once you say, let's just pretend that your range is between 120 and 125.
Uh-huh.
So you said, okay, I like to stay between 120 and 125. What, let's just say the scale said 127. What would you then do? What would you kind of say to yourself? Okay, I'm about two pounds higher than what I normally like to be.
Right.
What's the self-talk that's going on in your mind?
Well, first of all, I want to stress that the self-talk is not harsh. It's not. I'm not beating myself up. I feel like sometimes when people do that, especially if they tend to be an emotional eater, that may make them eat even more because they're feeling bad about themselves. So it's definitely not a harsh self-judgment, but it's just an indicator of, okay, my weight is trending up. So, if I want to stay at what I think is my healthy weight, then I need to I cut out a little bit of the sugar, the white flour. I might need to exercise a little more. And you know what? I can tell it's happening.
It's nothing drastic. It's nothing drastic. It's just small tweaks.
Absolutely. And you know what? I can tell when it happens. It's typically it's going to be up when I come back from vacation. Again, I don't beat myself up. I just know, well, yeah, I splurged on vacation, and so now it's time to get back into a healthier routine.
So would you say that, let's say that you're 2 pounds higher than what you normally want to be, but you're really craving nachos that night. Would you eat the nachos but just maybe eat a little bit less than you normally would? Or would you say, I'm going to have salad tonight? Which route would you go?
Well, again, we all know 2 pounds could even be water weight, but I do like to keep myself in that range. So, I'd probably go for the salad. Mm-hmm. If I'm under that, and I want nachos, I'm gonna eat nachos. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So after a hard day, let's say let's say you've just had a
I want to add, I don't weigh myself on vacation, by the way.
Okay. Okay. So after a hard day, do you ever say reward yourself with food at all?
I don't. And years ago I may have, but I work as a cognitive behavioral therapist, so I'm trying to always be cognizant of what I'm thinking, and I kind of look at it like, I make sure I look at it like my reward. I've already had a rough day. My reward needs to be, I need to reward myself with health. So I look at it like I need to nourish my body.
So a lot of times people will say, like, my go-to, like, if you are stressed, what would you say your go-to would be?
The healthier option would be a long walk, but I would enjoy, well, not when I'm stressed. If I'm stressed, I'd like to go on a long walk. If I'm going out with friends, on a Saturday night, I'm just one that would probably enjoy a nice glass of wine over a piece of cheesecake. I don't have any kind of preoccupation with food, but when I'm stressed out, I usually go for a walk. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And do you ever say, like, I worked out, so I should go eat these brownies and ice cream? Like, would that ever come out of your mouth?
No, I tend to look at it like, if I've just worked out really hard and I've burned all those calories, I'm not going to go sabotage myself with ice cream and sweets and no, I think I worked out so hard, I don't want to ruin that. I want to eat healthy.
So do you ever just, like, kind of forget to eat sometimes? Like, you just get so busy? Or do you feel like you're very preoccupied with food? Like, what's for lunch, what's for dinner, just constantly thinking about food? Or are you saying, sometimes I might just get busy, I'll forget to eat?
Yeah, sometimes I'll get busy and I'll forget to eat.
Give an example of that.
Well, yesterday was an example. I was working with clients, and I actually had a break at 1, but one session went over, and then I had some paperwork to do, and next thing I know, another person's coming in, and it wasn't until I finished up at 4 o'clock that I realized I hadn't had anything to eat since breakfast. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't like to go sometimes that long, because then I'm more likely to eat something unhealthy, because I've allowed myself to get too hungry. But if I stay busy, usually food's not on my mind.
So do you count calories or carbs, or do you deprive yourself of any certain foods?
I don't count calories. Within the last 2 years, I've started for the first time ever trying to limit my carbs. I limit my carbs. I do not count calories.
So talk to me about, what does that look like when you're limiting your carbs?
I try to fill my plate more with a lean protein and salad, and I really don't eat fried foods anymore, and I don't miss them. They actually make me, I don't feel very well after I eat them since I've given them up. I might skip the white potato, skip the fries, and I may do a sweet potato. But yeah, that's what that looks like. I might skip the roll. Not always, though.
But if you want the roll, if you really want it, you have it.
Right.
Is your philosophy, if I really, really want it, I am going to have it. I'm never going to deprive myself.
Pretty much. Mm-hmm. And I also have to watch. That's why I have to watch allowing. I want to only eat when I'm hungry, but I have to watch allowing myself to get too hungry, mm-hmm. because if you and I were to go to dinner, mm-hmm. and it's 5 o'clock and I haven't had anything since my smoothie at breakfast, if they put the bread out on the table before our meal comes, I'm going to be eating a lot of the bread because I haven't eaten in so long. But if I had a salad for lunch and I haven't allowed myself to get too hungry, then I can pass on the bread and wait for my meal.
So how do you determine when you're physically hungry? Like, what are some of the symptoms that you feel like when you go, now I know I'm starting to get hungry? What does that look like for you?
Well, when I'm not hungry, if food is not in front of me, I'm not thinking about food. That's just me. However, if something that I really like is put in front of me, like let's say somebody at work brings in some donuts, then I'm in the habit of, before I just reach for one just because they look like they would taste good, asking myself, am I really hungry, or am I just eating that because I think it'll taste good?
And are there any foods for you that are not negotiable? Like where you're like, I'm just refusing to eat this under any circumstances because it's got so much chemicals in it. It's not even real food. There's no way I'm putting that in my body.
Well, I have to admit, I used to not be like that. I'd pretty much eat whatever I want. But, a couple years ago, I had a few health problems, and since then, you and I have talked about Twinkies and some of the things that can have a really, really long shelf life, and I try to stay away from all that.
So name some foods that you love to indulge in. Like if you're like, this is my day where I'm just gonna indulge, or I'm really craving it. What are like your favorite foods to eat?
Anybody who has hung out with me for any length of time knows that my go-to is nachos. I love nachos. My friends tease me. They're like, they know when they go to dinner with me, they are like, they could order for me at the restaurant. I'm not going to, but I can tell you who has great nachos and who has not very good nachos. So that's
and
my
you
thing.
And I both love Havana's nachos.
Yes.
Those are so good. Anything else that you're like, this is kind of my thing that I love?
Not like nachos.
Mm-hmm. That's your favorite.
Yeah.
So do you ever carry snacks with you, or you just, do you ever put like any nuts in your purse to keep you from keeping hungry, or no, you just kind of go, okay, when I'm hungry, that's when I'll start looking for something to eat?
I don't always carry something with me, but if I go to work, and I take something with me, which I do sometimes, some almonds and some healthy things, maybe a plant-based protein shake or something with me to work, then 9 times out of 10, I am going to get off work and eat a much healthier dinner. I may binge when I get off because if I don't pack a snack because I've skipped lunch, I've allowed myself to get too hungry.
So in general, do you snack or not really? Like you just will have lunch, have your lunch, have your dinner, or have your breakfast, whatever it is, and just eat those meals? Like, are you kind of snacking on things all day, or you're like, no, I'm eating my lunch, I'm eating my dinner, and...
I'm usually not snacking. I mean, I'll maybe have, appetizers if they're put in front of me before dinner, especially if it's a social gathering. But no, and I never snack after dinner. I just don't have an urge.
So, do you feel like, as far as like, if someone gave you something and you didn't love it, would you still eat it? Or would you say no? If it's, not a high star enjoyment for me, I'm not going to eat it.
If it's healthy and I'm hungry, I'm eating it. Mm-hmm. Whether it tastes good or not. Mm-hmm. If I'm not very hungry, I may not eat it. Or if it's not healthy for me and I'm not crazy hungry, I'm not going to eat it.
And do you have any tricks that help you eat less? So like you would say like this is what I do that helps me eat less food than so I'm not like eating huge portions.
Well, I've got to admit, I know that, packing up half your food at the restaurant is a great trick. I'm not very good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I try not to order more than I can eat. The nachos are a tricky one because they're large. Mm-hmm. So it always helps if I have somebody splitting it with me. Uh-huh. So tricks. I try not to buy unhealthy things that I know are going to be tempting if I allow myself to get overly hungry. Mm-hmm. Because, if I buy cookies and I might like that aren't very healthy and I get over hungry, or I told you the other day we were talking, and the Pop-Tarts, the ones I bought were not very healthy, and I allowed myself to get overly hungry and indulged. But I try not to buy the stuff that might even tempt me.
So I want you to tell the story. Remember when we were going on a walk one day, and we were talking about the story about if I wanted to get from place A to place B, and I started walking, and I stumbled back a couple steps, I wouldn't go all the way back to place A. I want you to describe that story because we talked about it. Do you remember the story?
Absolutely.
So I want you to talk about how people who are going on a diet,
right?
How that story, describe it as much in detail as you can, how that, when people start falling backwards, they kind of just go all in.
Well, in cognitive behavioral therapy, we call it all or none thinking. And it's all or none thinking. And a lot of people do this, whatever it is, whether it be food, alcohol, whatever it is, it's, okay, well, I've already messed up. So I was going to not eat the cookies, and so I already ate 3 cookies, so I might as well finish off the box. Mm-hmm. Or I've wrecked my diet today, so the diet's over, and so they continue to eat unhealthy the next day, and the next day they figure they've already wrecked their diet. Or
so explain how that maps with the place A to place B.
Okay, so I'm going to give you one more example. Mm-hmm. Somebody who eats the donut in the morning because they were brought into the office, and so they continue to eat unhealthy all day because they've already wrecked their diet for the day. That's their mentality. How that relates is it shouldn't be all or none thinking. If you are going, like we were talking on the walk, if I'm trying to walk from place A to place B, and I take 2 steps back, I am not all the way back at place A. I don't need to start over. But if I take a step back and I get up, and I may take a few steps forward, and then even if I take 1 step back, if I get back up and take 2 steps forward, I'm going to eventually end up at place B. So it's just, we need to allow ourselves to make mistakes. We need to allow ourselves to mess up. But it's just about not thinking that you're all the way back at square one. Just get back on track. Just get back on track.
And the other piece is that it goes back to, I want you to describe this because there's no food that you can't have. So if you want nachos, you don't look at, when you eat nachos, I'm taking a couple steps back. You're just saying, I'm having nachos. Like, that's okay. You don't in your mind go, up, I'm taking a couple steps back because I'm eating nachos. It's like, no, I want nachos. I'm physically hungry. I'm eating the nachos. It's fine to eat them. I'm not going to eat nachos every night, but in your mind, do you ever feel like, oh, I'm eating nachos, I'm taking a couple steps back?
No, I never view it that way.
See, that's what I think the key is that you're never saying, okay, I had nachos, I'm taking a couple steps back. That's what people have to get out of their mind is that, okay, I was physically hungry, I wanted nachos, I ate nachos, I'm still fine. Like,
right.
What people do is they go, oh, I ate nachos, back to that all or nothing. They now think they're taking a couple steps back, and then they go all the way to eating, now I'm going to eat donuts, now I'm going to eat ice cream, now I'm going to... eat everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah, I don't view it that way at all. I view it as, if you were to bring in donuts and I ate a donut, let's say I ate 3 donuts. I wouldn't eat 3. I'd probably be sick if I did that. But let's say I ate 3 donuts. I would look at it. I wouldn't beat myself up, but I would look at it like, I should take a walk today and I should definitely eat healthy the rest of the day. I might look at it like that, but it's about having a healthy relationship with food and not looking at it as something else.
So let's talk about, I know that you had shared with me something in one of your books called, I think it was called HALTS, HALTS.
Yes.
Right? So talk about where you learned that from and what that whole acronym is about.
Okay, I first learned it when I was training to be a therapist, and I was working with addictions. And people who have been in recovery for addictions, people in addiction circles, most of them know HALTS well. And the H for HALTS stands for hungry, the A for angry, the L for lonely, the T for tired, and the S for stressed. And if you are any of those things, you're going to be in addiction circles. They teach if you're any of those things, you're going to be more at risk for a relapse to your addiction. So you and I were talking, and I thought that same thing could actually be applied to food. Food can become a psychological addiction. And when you allow yourself to get way overly hungry, you should eat only when you're hungry, but if you allow yourself to get way overly hungry, if you're an emotional eater and you are angry without having a healthy way to cope with that or someone to talk to, if you are lonely and again, you don't know how to cope with that, you don't have somebody to talk to, you allow yourself to get too overtired, or you don't have effective stress management techniques, then you are going to, if you are an emotional eater, or if your go-to is food, you're going to be much more vulnerable to eating the wrong things.
So it's funny because when you told me that, I searched HALT and I found HALT, HALT, and then I found something else that said HALTS. So I think it might have used to be just HALT, and I think they might have added the S for stressed because people are more stressed, I think, than they ever have.
Right.
So I think they might have been, the old acronym was just HALT, and then someone was like, we better add an S onto it and add stress. I don't know, but I remember when I just had Googled it, I only saw the HALT part at first.
Yes. So yeah.
What would you say that people, the kind of self-talk that people need to say to themselves when they're feeling like they blew it? So they felt like they took a couple steps back. They just, for whatever reason, they went to a party. They just ate everything but the kitchen sink. They overate. They didn't eat when they were hungry. They were just stressed, and they just had a night where they just binged. What are the thoughts and what is the self-talk they need to say to themselves to kind of pick themselves back up to get them back on the right track?
Well, there's studies that show one of the worst things they can do is shame themselves. Some people, even people who mean well, use shame as a form of discipline, but actually, shame is very connected with addictions and unhealthy behavior. So you don't want to shame yourself. I think you want to treat yourself actually with a lot of self-compassion. There's Kristin, who's a psychologist who did a lot of studies on self-compassion, actually showed that people who treat themselves with a lot of self-compassion are actually hold themselves more accountable than people who don't. So I think you have to have a lot of self-compassion, and the self-talk could be, how would you treat how would you treat a young child that you love? How would you treat that child? We need to recognize that child, we still have that childlike part inside us no matter how old we get, and our self-talk needs to be that kind. In other words, you might not want to say this out loud, but you could. But okay, honey, you weren't very healthy today, and it's okay. But it's time to eat the right things. It's time to eat your veggies. I mean, you almost need to talk to yourself like you would a kid you love.
Got it. And any suggestions you have with people who are preoccupied with food? Like they just are like food obsessed, like they just are constantly thinking, they just finished lunch, they're thinking about what am I going to have for dinner, or what am I going to have for snacks, but just constantly have that preoccupation with food. What tips would you give that person?
Well, either by themselves, with a friend they trust, with clergy, with a therapist. They may want to really look into what emotions they're trying to avoid, or maybe what thoughts they're trying to avoid. A lot of times there's an unconscious something going on, and whether people are using food, alcohol, gambling, sex, over shopping, a lot of times we are using it to numb out something that we don't want to look at. So it's just kind of looking deeper.
That quote that you always say about the sit with unease to prevent disease. Talk about that for a second.
I think I told you have to sit, and it wasn't mine. I got it from somewhere. But you have to sit with unease to prevent disease, meaning for all of us, we are human. Uncomfortable emotions are going to pop up. But what we don't realize is our tendency is to protect ourselves from that. So we can become preoccupied with a variety of different things. And then it's on an unconscious level, we're not sitting with the discomfort. And if we learn to actually embrace it and know that it'll pass and be able to sit with whatever discomfort is there, then we may not be numbing it out with unhealthy behaviors.
That's so good. Well, thank you so much, Kristin. I appreciate you coming by and telling us these tips.
Yeah, always love chatting with you.